Hi, fáilte ó go léarnacht agus buchas den am thógaint chun bheith páirte linn. Tám chun scáil anna scara livanis. Tá míid an seo chun na smaointí a tháinig amach as an ggéirlinn athallú curcarsúla mí meitheamh a roinnt leis an pobal. You're all very welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us for this session. We're here to share the ideas that have emerged from the Reimagine workshop that took place in June this year. Just a little bit of housekeeping. First, we are going to record the session here this evening, and so we will be able to share it with a much wider audience than those who can attend this evening. We'll share it on our websites, and we'll share it through social media channels as well. We have 8 people speaking tonight, so we're each going to speak very briefly. This is a taster session for you to gain an understanding of the ideas that have emerged from the workshop, and there'll be plenty of opportunity to follow up afterwards. I'll be monitoring the chat for the evening, so if you want to interact with us through that, please feel free to do so. And I know that some of the group members are part of the attendees tonight. They may want to contribute to answering questions as well through the chat function. So, fad svi an sailor fad ag aharu tish COVID-19 higumar grevdina ag jenaf machnaf slisanu dan tauki agus gymich deshigan tas nu her le fisha krahud and le hinish I downta kela. So while the world was getting turned on its head due to COVID-19, we realized that many people were reflecting on how to make changes for a better future. And this provided an opportunity to bring people together to start the journey of building a collective and inclusive vision for the Dingle Peninsula. I'd like to draw your attention to the Carrick 2030 logo on this slide, which you may have noticed on recent adverts, brochures and promotional material. For the past 2 years, ESB Networks, Marai, Dingle Hub and NEWKD have worked collaboratively together to enable the broader societal changes required for sustainable transition. And this has resulted in the Clefa Dehora initiative, which was successful in a funding application to Science Foundation Ireland. And this SFI funding, along with additional resources from all of the partners, is what enables us to host workshops and to bring the community together regularly. So much work has been started on vision building under the umbrella of Carrick 2030 through the development of socioeconomic and energy master plans for the area. Over 200 people have taken part in a series of community meetings and gatherings that took place between November 2019 and February 2020. And it's lucky we held them when we did, because we wouldn't be doing it now. So we took the information and issues that emerged from that work to give background for the Reimagine workshop. These related to accommodation, public transport services, Verbert na Gaeilge, strengthening the links between agriculture and tourism, and sustainably generating and using energy. We worked with Imagination of Things to create an online experience that would encourage exciting, aspirational and inspirational ideas, and we invited people to join us to start the journey to build a community vision. So to ensure the workshop could be participative and inclusive, we had to limit the numbers in June, and we realized that this means that the workshop was just one part of a much greater overall process. We're now ready we're now at the next stage, ready to bring ideas to the wider community so that you can all be part of the process. We are starting to identify mechanisms to turn these ideas into reality, and we encourage you to get involved in ideas that are of interest to you and where you can play a role to help them to progress. I'd like to briefly introduce the people who have been involved from the start. I mentioned that Carrick 2030 is a multi-partner initiative, and Dingle Hub, Marai, NEWKD and ESB Networks have been working closely together for the past 2 years to drive projects relating to the low carbon transition. You'll find details of all of these and much more information on the website carrickaghainaftroca.com. And who are the Dingle Hub team? Well, we have Maggie, Nadine and myself, and we work together to build a strong and vibrant hub community. We make sure that people working on the peninsula feel supported and connected, especially if they're working or learning from home. I'm delighted that our board members, Murrin Kelleher, Seamus O'Hara and Brendan Toohey were able to join us for our workshop in June, as did Caroline Boland, who represented our advisory board. And we had very strong representation from our youth advisory board, with participation from Clefa Dehora, Barry Bambury and Sam Moriarty. Collaboration has been key to everything we do, and we are working with many organisations listed here to identify mutually beneficial funding opportunities that will support valuable, engaged research and will lead to community engagement and research roles that will be based here on the Dingle Peninsula. And this all contributes to the development of the peninsula as a living lab, a place where we can be central to co-creating community-based solutions for a sustainable future. It's very important for us to align with the Sustainable Development Goals, and all of the work that we do seeks to contribute to the achievement of these. I will just draw your attention to some of the principles here, such as co-creating solutions, joining the dots and making connections, and what we hope is that you might see these continuously reflected in the work that we do. What are we looking to achieve? Well, we want to build a flourishing community, fostering a vibrant and diverse ecosystem of stakeholders to facilitate the creation and maintenance of well-paid year-round jobs on the Dingle Peninsula. And building a collective, inclusive vision for the future is an important cornerstone to achieving this goal. And I hope you'll be inspired by what you hear here this evening to get involved and to help make these ideas a reality. One thing that I have to note is that not every area of interest and relevance to the peninsula has been covered by these ideas. One of the most notable of these being agriculture, but it's important to state that much work has been done in this area through other projects such as the Anaerobic Digestion Feasibility Study, the EU Skin Project and the IoT Farm Ambassador projects. And this work must also be weaved into the overall vision in time. I mentioned already that collaborative links with different organisations were leading to funding opportunities. And I suppose I'm very excited to announce tonight that the Dingle Hub, through collaboration with TAGASC, has received 220,000 of Horizon 2020 funding to enable Carrick to be a sustainable innovation pilot for the EU Plutus project for the next 3 years. And this will essentially allow us to build on all of the previous work done in the agriculture sector, to strengthen the links between agriculture and tourism, to help generate new agri-food and agri-tourism businesses. We'll be bringing you much more information on this project in the coming weeks, but it's just some good news to kickstart our night. So with this in mind, know that opportunities exist to progress all of the ideas you hear, and Carrick, with a growing reputation as a living lab, is ideally placed to avail of these opportunities. I'm now going to hand you over to Vitar Fair from Imagination of Things, who expertly guided us through the workshop in June. He will take you through an overview of the concepts and before we then hand over to the individual groups to share the ideas that emerged. Over to you, Vitar.
Just a second. First, just to give a little bit of context, we are a creative studio based in Amsterdam. So you might ask why these people were involved with the Dingo Peninsula. We feel very thankful and blessed that one of our partners is a Dingo man. That's how he likes to say. And that's how we made the connection with the Dingo Hub. And this is a type of work that we have been doing for a while, but I think it was probably the first experience where it felt really grounded. It felt deeply connected to a community that was eager to change and to do things and to propose instead of just react. As you can imagine, because of the whole pandemic situation, a lot of the projects or groups that we have been interacting with, they're doing something that I would like to call reacting. And it's, of course, it's fair. We all, in some capacity, we need to react and adapt to what's happening. But I think one of the most fresh and interesting elements from my point of view, so an external point of view, not knowing all the details and the heritage and the history of the peninsula, not knowing a lot about the background of the participants, it was this desire to propose, to proactively imagining propositions for their future instead of just reacting. And the reason I like to highlight that is just because then it's the type of imagination that it feels more sustainable, because it's not reacting to what is happening just now. It's taking the opportunity of what is just happening as a way, or as this perfect environment, perfect excuse to dare to change, dare to think what are the possibilities. The other thing that I think was really interesting for me, it's an assumption that I think it was confirmed. Let me just 1 second. I always have this, because most of our work is engaging with groups, so it doesn't matter if it's like 5 or 50 people. There is this assumption that friction is, it should be, you shouldn't shy away from friction. Every good group of people trying to do something, they will come across some type of disagreement or some type of a process to reach consensus. And I think for me, this was really special, because I think the ability to go through that and try to articulate and reach consensus inside each group, but also overall with every participant, was something that it made me feel very inspired. I think a healthy and active community is not a community that has no friction. It's the community that have its own ways to deal with that, to engage, to overcome those frictions. And I think, if nothing else, that was the thing that the workshop was able to put together, which is like strategies to transform friction into propositions. So what I wanted to go over super quick, I'm not going to read the website. Basically what we did was we organized the final concepts into categories, let's say. The first category was like new dialogues and connections. That basically means what are the new possibilities for the peninsula to have dialogues with other regions, which is something that I think it's really interesting if you start thinking less inside the hierarchy and the kind of like the diplomatic bureaucracy that we probably have in every country, and what that can spark. So you have ideas that basically try to touch on this connection. If the Dingo Peninsula could talk, what it could say, and maybe more important, with who the peninsula wants to talk to. So a lot of those ideas are about that connection. One of the things we did is not only you have the ideas, but for each, let's say, direction, we also have super small insights that they didn't become a full idea, but they were like really refreshing. So we also highlight them. So for example, for the new dialogues and connections, one of those insights that you're probably going to be able to connect with one of the concepts, the playground for discoveries. The insight is this whole idea of like open calls and long stays. By open calls, I mean, what if the Peninsula can kind of agree on what type of talent or what type of capabilities it wants to attract. And it doesn't have to be permanent. It can be a long stay. So it's this idea of like borrowing from artistic residencies or this kind of like temporary innovation labs where you could not only disrupt how seasonal most of the tourism is, but qualify that. So it's the time for us to also rethink what is tourism. So there's a new category waiting to happen here. And I think from different groups and different ideas, I thought a lot of traction around that. Another one was, it might sound simple or unrealistic, but I love the idea of like, okay, now that Dingo is able to talk, and what is it? What is the content of that dialogue, and with who? This idea of making it official. So what is the Dingo Foreign Affairs? Are we going to have Dingo embassies? What is the job description of that? What is the vision for that? This idea that the Peninsula can engage in meaningful interactions with other regions that share common values, that there is a dialogue to be made, and how can something like that facilitate? Another example is the other route, which is persistence and resilience, which is probably the most community-centered, because it's all about how to build local resilience. It's very connected to the idea of what is it that we can do to rely less on external factors, and also how to don't put the region in a position that it feels vulnerable for whatever is happening in the world, that you can just react. So how to be a little bit more proactive about that. And then we're going to have a few insights. One of the insights here that I loved was the culture on wheels. There's mobility was a big part of the conversation. And I really like the idea of, instead of like building things around the peninsula, also putting things on wheels and using that as a way to decentralize all the opportunities, all the cultural activities, all the interesting things that can happen. There are more examples like that. I just encourage everyone to enter the website. The last thing I wanted to say is that there is also, as a, let's say, trademark of the type of thing we do, there's a really playful experience that called the Dingo Invention Generator. We're basically putting together a sentence that looks like an invention, but it's basically all the vocabulary that we shared in the workshop. We took all the words and we just trained this little algorithm to put together a sentence that they feel like it's a new invention, but it's just a playful way to put everyone in this similar mindset. And as a visitor, you can also craft a little bit and add your spin into the inventions. The website is the documentation of most of the things that happen. It's also a way to inspire you. If you are inspired, there is a space there to share your story with us. This is something that is very strategic and important for the hub, to be able to connect with you, either because you have a deep interest in one idea, or you just want to be involved in whatever is next. It's unclear, but that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That lack of clarity with passion and commitment can bring a lot of interesting things. Thank you for the opportunity. And in the very end, I will share with everyone a link to a tool that you can start a conversation about the ideas that you're about to listen.
Thanks very much for that, Victor. I'm going to introduce the speakers now. And first up is going to be John Halstead, and he is going to talk to us about the sustainable transport idea. John is a talented artist and trained as an engineer, so he helped represent both our creative and technology sectors. I'm going to share my screen again now and hand over to John.
And good evening. Thank you, Deirdre. Just a quick word about the subheading you see here. It implies that this idea is merely for tourists. It's not. It's for the community. That the tourists will benefit from it is a byproduct of the idea. We looked at the problem caused by the number of tour coaches that come into Dingle and go on to travel around Sleigh Head. As most of you know, they travel on roads which aren't ideally suitable for large coaches, particularly the stretch from Clefa Dehora through to Dunquin, where if they meet oncoming traffic, often log jams start up, accidents happen, and for the communities who live along that section of the route, it's a serious problem. The way we looked to come around this was to have a designated coach park on the perimeter of the town. Fortunately, we have this new road that's being built going from the new hospital and runs parallel to Main Street, a route where the coaches could be diverted and would be led to a designated coach park where their passengers would be offloaded. There would be a reception centre of sorts there, offering various experiences for the people who arrive. This could be ongoing trips in more suitable vehicles, touring around Sleigh Head, but not just Sleigh Head. There's no reason why you couldn't have tour buses, minibuses now going over Connor Pass to the northern side of the peninsula, to the various villages around the peninsula. You could have many offerings that not everybody might want to travel around. You could, people who are in the bike hire business, for instance, could have their outlets there. Restaurants, pubs could advert their business there and perhaps provide transport for any tourists who wish to go there. You could have small short-term car hire systems. The only limit to what can be done really is your imagination. What it does do is take the load of the coach away from the infrastructure to the west of Dingle, making life more pleasant for everybody, I think. It also takes the coaches away from the seafront, where most people like to see the harbour and the seafront rather than the back of a bus, and hopefully would add to the experience of everybody. Now, we used as an indicative site, which you can see on the photograph of the first slide, the car park by the Mart in Dingle. It's on the new road. It's nice and handy for the town. Getting permission to use it, getting the right to use it is beyond me. That would have to come. But since we came up with these ideas, as some of you may know, last month an application for planning permission for the Dingle Hospital stroke workshop has gone into Carrick County Council. Here it is. Many of the ideas we had for the transport hub are duplicated here. It's also on the bypass and would be an ideal place to site this. You probably need, whichever site was chosen, some way of conveying the passengers around the town. This could be a small, I think we've mentioned here, a sort of trackless tram system which just circulated around the town, a hop-on, hop-off system. You could also have, as I said, individual transport provided by retail outlets, pubs, restaurants. I think it's an idea worth doing. I think everybody would benefit from it, and I would suggest the planning permission for this, for the hospital, is up on the Carrick County Council planning site. I suggest you take a look at it. It's a fascinating application. It does run to 1,000 pages, so it's a big download. But I think it's a splendid idea and would be an ideal spot for the project we've talked about now, the transport hub. I think that's about it, Deirdre. So I can hand you back now and move on to the next.
Thank you very much for that, John. And I can say that much work is happening in the area of transport. We are going to see some newly redesigned bus services here on the peninsula very shortly, both on local routes and on the route from Tralee to Dingle. That's one part of the journey towards sustainable transport. Another part is encouraging the use of those new services as they come on board, and I suppose a mindset shift. But thinking about this process and biting off the bits that we can chew and changing things bit by bit is going to be a very interesting space, I think, in the short term. Okay, so we're going to move on next to Mary Lavry Carrick, who is a writer and educator, and she splits her time between North Kerry and the Dingle Peninsula. She helped represent the education and creative sectors and also brings perspective on some of the challenges of living here full-time. So she's here to tell us about a new mould, a new social living concept.
The group that I worked with were Mary Kiernan, John Collins, Seamus O'Hara and Trina O'Neill, and we found ourselves examining alternative ways that communities might be more socially inclusive, with particular focus on the change in demographics and the needs of a growing older population. And while the Dingle Peninsula, we were all very much in agreement, is a very beautiful, geographically speaking, an immensely beautiful location, it's people that are its most valuable asset, and so we focused on that. By way of a title, we came up with a new mould, the crisscross of generations. We wanted to try to envisage a mould where young and old, it was very much a multi-generational notion that we wanted to encapsulate rather than segregating, particularly in old age, into kind of a one-way system that you would be removed potentially and possibly from your community. So that's where it came from. You may be surprised to see an image of Croke Park, but we thought, and amused as well, but it's, for us, an example of a physical feature that has several physical features that we found inspiring. It had a center green area. Of course, it wouldn't necessarily be a playing field, but it would be as a central point what a community could be built around. Of course, we'd be thinking gardens, we'd be thinking all kinds of facilities that would be outdoors. But the notion of having the green area at the center, surrounded by an interconnected system, where you'll see by way of the description there would be open and flexible living space, keeping in mind that we were particularly focused on people with aging needs. A space of interaction where, again, that crisscross of generations would be a very natural experience. Intergenerational, again, very much community space, independent living units, including, high dependency, because that too could be incorporated in so far as our discussions thought so. Units in there for social, cultural activities, music, dance, gardens, meets up. I suppose the cultural heritage of the Dingle Peninsula is immensely rich. It's also very unique. Its native tongue, Antianga Gaelga, is very, very important. And within this context, we felt that the culture could be held together intact and that it could thrive and flourish. And that's why we thought as well this unit would be well worth investigating. It would have freedom of movement, freedom to choose location, what it is one might pursue, with whom, etc. This notion of being independent and being free. It would be, of course, an ecosystem that would be very environmentally friendly, designed to ensure that everyone would belong and nobody would not belong. In regards the notion, your space, your place, whatever your age, we felt that although only a few words encapsulated the core idea that was at the root of where we were all coming from in our discussion in June. And with regard to the second slide, our unique proposition was that perhaps we might embark on devising a charter, a written agreement that would set out the rights of people, all people, visitors, people who live there, who have lived there for generations, people who have settled there, and that the rights of all people would be somehow enshrined in order to ensure that no one part of society could or would inadvertently or otherwise overwhelm another. And we thought perhaps examining the notion of a charter such as that going forward for the peninsula may be worthwhile. And from that then we felt the social unit that we were envisaging and dreaming up, I suppose, may be possible, and it could stem from that. For us, in practical terms, the next step would be to involve people and to get the conversation going through a press release in local media, inviting communities across the peninsula to become involved, to start that conversation in all of the parishes of the Dingle Peninsula. I think there's more than 8 when you take the whole peninsula into account. Involve North East West Kerry Development because they're already involved in research that touches on where we're coming from. Participate in all festivals whenever they get back online again and on stream again, I should say, and the streets of the peninsula, such as the Ultimate Food Festival, the Voices, and all of the others. Take an article in West Kerry Live. It's well read, and it's a wonderful way to get that discussion lifted off the ground. Visit other centres of best practice, of which there are many in our own country and abroad. Connect diverse groups who would all be relevant to what we're describing, and then to find the research funding and carry out the feasibility studies that may be necessary. For us, we think, given the demographics, that it's very valuable to be people-centred, to be centred on the needs of those who are vulnerable. I suppose as we age, that's where we're going, and to create a world where the crisscross of generations would become the norm. Thank
you. Thank you very much for that, Mary. I do know that NEWKD has been awarded funding through the EU Smart Villages project as well, which will hopefully lend support and resources to help progress this idea. And the whole idea of sheltered accommodation and shared living spaces was to be very much part of that proposal too. So the next person that I'm going to introduce is Clefa Dehora, and she represents our Youth Advisory Board. She's completed a Master's in Sustainability and she's now started working with EirGrid. So she helped to represent the needs of our youth and what a sustainable future means for them. Clefa's here to tell us all about Educate from Dingle.
Hi everyone, I'm presenting on behalf of Group C tonight, which consisted of Orla, Dinny, Kevin, my sister Marin and myself. So our proposal is Educate from Dingle, and the purpose of this proposal is to create interconnected online higher education network. We believe Dingle should be one of the first rural towns in Ireland where people can study and graduate from a higher or further education course through a fully funded and government-supported online model. This model creates present opportunities and future rewards in terms of population stability, societal and economic resilience, creative and innovative local thinking, as well as making Dingle an exemplar of this model of education for the rest of the world. Additionally, we imagine our broader population participating in continuous further education courses from home, and currently this is not possible due to economic or travel constraints. So in the group, we discussed some of the benefits with this initiative. So firstly, I'll talk about environment. So there would be a decrease in travel, which subsequently would lead to a decrease in carbon emissions. There would also be a decrease in urban crowding. And then for the Dingle Peninsula, it would become less reliant on seasonal work, and holiday homes would be occupied all year round. For the universities, more students without crowding the campus, which is obviously very prevalent nowadays with COVID-19. And then finally, for the students, it would create an opportunity to pursue further education from home, and they wouldn't be as financially burdened. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. So what is our unique proposition? We know the demand already exists on the peninsula. Students leave to seek educational opportunities, and adults seek to upskill and improve learning. Current and potential innovations then make the learning experience not only feasible but attractive. We also discussed tracking carbon offsets from decreased commuting to and from the peninsula on an environmental point. And the Dingle Peninsula also offers an intellectual and practical opportunity to practice what we preach in a way which would be more difficult to achieve in an urban landscape. Landlords would also benefit from leasing holiday homes during the semester, which would subsequently add to GA and sporting clubs, as they would benefit from players being around all year round. Students already have to spend weeks in the Gaeltacht for certain university courses learning Irish, so why not make that full time? And also, unqualified tradesmen can obtain qualifications from the peninsula whilst being able to work at the same time. So what are the next steps? We want to get stakeholders on board: Pobl Scoil and Closhida students, guidance counsellors, educational institutes such as the Sacred Heart University, local interests such as tourist accommodation, and those with special learning needs, and funding partners. We want to have a showcase day for schools and mature students in Dingle. And due to COVID-19, universities are mainly teaching online now anyways, so we can use Dingle to roll out a trial syllabus for the academic year. This in turn will help families struggling post-COVID with education costs. Universities also need more Irish students post COVID-19, as there will be fewer international students to cover the college fees. And we also briefly discussed some unique trials, perhaps intellectual gap years in the Peninsula, and subsidies for eco-friendly travel for students to conferences and parent universities. So if you have any questions, feel free to get on to me and gur míle maith agaibh as éisteacht.
Thanks very much, Clefa, for that. I know with the situation with COVID at the moment, there are many people trying to study from here, and as a very first tiny step, at least we want the hub, when restrictions allow, to be able to support learners here on the peninsula, at least with the facilities they might need, or helping them to feel connected. The next group we're going to go on to, we do have an idea around sensory gardens on the peninsula, and I know the group here were anxious to present this tonight, but circumstances have prevented that. I'm not going to do it the injustice of trying to present it, but it's a very achievable idea, and I know they had plans to start with a pop-up sensory garden in Onascall. I believe the group there would be quite active in this area. So what we'll do is we'll get a recording of this presentation and we will combine it with the others at a later date. For now, we're going to move to Cheryl Donoghue, who's going to speak to us about the Dingle Energy Academy. So she's a writer and a computer programmer, and so it's another lovely mix representing creativity and technology. She's also one of our Coder Dojo mentors, and so helps inspire our young coders. So over to you, Cheryl, to tell us about an Energy Academy for the Peninsula.
Okay, thanks, Deirdre. I'm speaking on behalf of our group. It was myself, Katrina Fallon, and Leah Dawn Slattery. And we came up with the idea of a Dingle Energy Academy that's based on the existing Samso Energy Academy. Samso is a small island off the coast of Denmark. In 1997, they won a bid to become sort of an energy center. And 10 years later, they were completely self-sufficient. The Energy Academy is sort of the center of their efforts. And we think that Dingle is kind of uniquely positioned and has unique talents that would make an academy like that work here as well. We already have a number of initiatives going on that deal with sustainable energy. Deirdre mentioned a few of these earlier. We have the electric car initiative. There's the home heating energy initiative, and some of the agriculture initiatives also deal with reducing energy footprint. If you can pop on to the next slide. A couple of reasons why we think this would work particularly well in Dingle. First is that it's a place that people already want to come to. And if we have a forward-looking academy that's looking at making this place and perhaps all of Ireland at some point energy independent, and particularly with a particular view on sustainable energy, wind and solar, might attract people to come here and stay here longer to find out what's going on, or maybe it would even attract people who want to live here, more full-time residents who want to live in a place. Secondly, our location is obviously conducive to wind energy in particular, and I know we have talent on the peninsula who's already looking at wind energy onshore and offshore. And we are also home to 2 universities, which I think is fairly amazing for such a tiny place. And if we pull in the talent and just the academic resources from both UCC and Sacred Heart, that would also give us a head start on developing our own little academy. I think, if we created something along these lines in Dingle, it obviously has the potential to to make Dingle a self-sustaining place, but we have the potential then to be a model for the rest of the country, and also to interact with people internationally who are doing the same thing. So is not just for the peninsula, it's also looking out nationwide, and it will help us kind of get more international context and bring more people in. The first step that we thought we should do is actually invite the person who is kind of the sustaining force behind the Energy Academy in Samso, and invite him to come to Dingle and have a talk, because they have been doing this for, what did I say, 1997, more than 20 years, been very successful, and in particular, they're very focused on bringing everybody in, you know, getting buy-in from everybody in the community to what this would involve. And I understand he's also a very charismatic person, so it would be a good talk to go to. And I think there is a potential for job creation just in the academy itself. I know the Samso Academy has, I think they have 8 full-time employees at this point, but also just in sustainable resources, in retrofitting homes, in possibly sustainable tourism, and in innovations in energy efficiency. And that's where I'll leave it. Hopefully we can get Soren here. Katrina apparently has already made some contact with Soren and one of his associates, so we do have some contacts with them already, and hopefully we could get that going shortly. I'll give it back to you, Deirdre.
Thank you very much for that, Cheryl. I agree totally. This is something that we are halfway en route to already. I mentioned engaged research before. We have a lot of research under our belt in the area of energy. We will be moving forward to try and implement community-owned energy here. We have close relationships with the educational institutes around us. And as you said, Katrina's already made links with Soren, and it's something that was very suitable in their community, and I think I don't see why it's not possible and achievable here, with a lot of benefits coming from it. I'm going to move on next to Barry Bambury, who they have a lovely idea here. Barry is an energy engineer who has recently joined a new startup energy efficiency company called DC6 Technologies. The company will be based from Dingle, and we're looking forward to having him working alongside us as the company grows. He's going to tell us about Dingle 2029. I am of Dingle. Over to you, Barry.
Thanks very much, Deirdre. Cheers, Deirdre. So I was in Group F. There was Joe Maguire, Deanne O'Connor, Mary Ferter, myself. So when we started off, we started talking about, I suppose, what it meant to be from Dingle, what are the shared values the people of Dingle hold, and what makes Dingle unique, really. And then the conversation went to, I suppose, the history of Dingle, and the people in my group had great knowledge and the thousands of years of well-documented history there of Dingle and the surrounding areas. But one thing we really started to talk about was the Treaty of Dingle that was written in 1529. And as we discussed it, we saw a lot of parallels between what happened back in 1529, and we saw an opportunity that the 500-year anniversary of this is coming up in 2029, and could we commemorate this? And could we look at what they did back in 1529 and do something similar for ourselves? And I suppose a quick history lesson. So I'm embarrassed to say I knew absolutely nothing about Treaty of Dingle during the workshop, but I was educated. So back in 1329, the Earl of Desmond took over administrative control over that area in the blue there. So you have West Kerry, North Kerry, and some of East Cork. And then by the end of the century, he took over full control, which was no easy feat because the people of Kerry at the time were known as being particularly difficult to control. Fast forward to 1520, you can see there Henry VIII and Cardinal Wolsey. They were trying to take over this area at the time. And this, as you can imagine, was met by great opposition from the Earl of Desmond, because I suppose they were known for their tyranny and oppression at the time. So what the Earl of Desmond did was he reached out and tried to make a connection with Charles V, who was the King of Spain at the time. What he did was he sent over a couple of lads in a boat with some Irish wolfhounds and Irish falcons that were raised in the Blasket Islands, just in the hope that they'd reach San Sebastian and they could make a connection with Charles V. And thankfully, these gifts were very well received. Charles V then sent over Ambassador Fernandez, that's the guy here in 1529. When he arrived in Dingle, he noted a couple of things, but one of the first things he noted was the role of women in society he noted that women had a much more equal role in Dingle in 1529 than they had back in Spain. So I was delighted to hear that. And I suppose he met then with the Earl of Desmond of Dingle, and between himself and the Earl created the Treaty of Dingle. And what the treaty was it gave the people under the Earl of Desmond co-equality with the people of the Habsburg countries. So you can kind of see this as something very similar to what we have in the EU today, something that was way before its time. And what this treaty did was it addressed the challenges people had of Dingle in 1529 by reaching out and making connections. So I suppose that's what we want to do. When we move forward, I suppose our next slide is about creating a Dingle Charter. So you can just click on there. The Dingle Charter, you can just click on to the next slide. Cheers, Deirdre. So the Dingle Charter, we want to look at the past, look at our present, and look at the future. So when we're looking backwards, we're looking first of all at the language, obviously very unique. We're Gaeltacht. We want to hang on to our language and build upon it and make it stronger. As well as that, we have many ancient traditions and ancient culture. Some of these are very strong and living today, but some of them might have fallen by the wayside, and we see this Dingle Charter as an opportunity to revive these traditions that might have fallen away. And then one I've already mentioned is equality. That was something I was delighted to hear, and we want to make this front and centre of our Dingle 2029 Charter. Bringing it into today then, the very centre of this whole Dingle Charter is this whole idea of I am of Dingle and making connections. The concept behind I am of Dingle, it doesn't necessarily mean you're from Dingle or you have ancestry in Dingle. It's much more of an abstract idea. So it could be just your parents told you a story about their vacation or their honeymoon or whatever in Dingle. It's this idea that there are people out there who have these abstract connections with Dingle, and we want to foster these connections. We want to do this in both a digital and a physical environment when we're able to do it again. So digital, we're thinking like online, we can create a hashtag of I am of Dingle on Twitter just to get people making these connections. And then of course, when we're able to have our events again, we'll be able to have physical stands, maybe at Dingle Food Festival, other voices, whatever. And then hopefully what we'll be hoping is that these connections, just like the 1529 Dingle Treaty, that this will foster trade and this will enable more businesses to trade into the future. And then finally, the last pillar of the Dingle Charter is sustainability. So I suppose the key things to mention in sustainability are energy, agriculture, maritime, transport and tourism. And this matches up very nicely with the work that the Dingle Hub are doing for 2030. And 2029 is not that far off 2030. So I think there's an opportunity there for some parallel stuff to be captured within the Dingle Charter. And I suppose just to summarise it then all again in one sentence, the whole idea is building on connections to address the problems of today, just like they did back in 1529. So I suppose that's it really. Thanks very much, Deirdre. Thanks for everyone's time this evening.
Thanks, Barry. That's great altogether. I love the idea of I am of Dingle and making those connections, because as we've seen over the summer months, so many people have so much, I suppose, affection for the place and feel such a connection to the place. It really would be brilliant to bring that together, and it can be done in a very, very achievable way, and linking it to the 2029 is quite exciting as well. So thanks for that, Barry. Now, last but not least is David Garner, who is a renewable energy consultant, and he's considerable experience in offshore wind projects. He's one of our community energy mentors, and he's a great guy to have around if we want to pursue community-owned energy projects. So David's going to talk to us about what's possible with Playground of Discoveries.
Thank you, Deirdre. Just to give you a little bit of background, the project team was myself, Miriam Ferreter, Stacey O'Connor and Katrina Nikanon. We started with the idea of how do we extend the tourist season and how do we bring different types of visitors to the peninsula and how do we get them to stay longer in the off season. So we started to think about, if you like, team building, and that developed into the idea of having perhaps companies turn up and have residencies here, sort of send their staff for weeks at a time where they could come here to work, but also to play, to absorb everything we have to offer on the Dingle Peninsula. So this brought us around to this idea of a playground of discovery. And in reality, we're starting to think about how we can host the world's most creative conference. So our pitch to the businesses is that they should really imagine a little bit about the Dingle Peninsula being a space where they can actually explore more than just their own business. They can explore their mind, their imagination. They can come here to explore all the great things around the peninsula, the landscape, the beauty, Obviously, everybody knows about the Dingle Peninsula. There's a lot of creative people. We have innovators, we have farmers, fishermen and artists. So we'd really like to bring together a meeting of minds between businesses from outside the peninsula who can send staff here, who can come here for conferences, but actually getting them engaged with all of the people on the peninsula. We think that we can really host interesting conferences here. And we're going to call this the playground of discovery. We've even got a little website there. Don't click on it. There's nothing at that URL. Deirdre, maybe you can just move on to the next slide for me. So our unique proposition was really around this idea to start with of a conference. We want to make sure that it's not just the same old conference. That anyone who's ever been to a conference will know that they're pretty dull. There's normally about 2 hours, which are interesting over 2 days, and you just drink far too much coffee. So we want to make sure there's some kind of process and involvement in the people of the peninsula alongside the businesses that come here. So they can do things like networking with future customers. They can do networking within their industry, and it involves a little bit more than just swapping a business card and meeting someone else who's a bit bored like yourself, as happens at a typical conference. The team building as well, we don't want that just to be something really dull that reminds you of an episode of The Office. We want that to be engaging with artists. We want it to be engaging with the landscape. So we really want to use everything that the peninsula has to offer: culture, landscape, history, the unique people, the arts, all of the talents here on the peninsula, to actually make sure these businesses want to come here and keep sending people here for weeks at a time. So yeah, we got a very simple plan. We need to bring together a lot of different stakeholders on the peninsula to design this kind of conference. It's not just the hotels and the B&Bs and the restaurants. We need to look at all the businesses and the artists and work out what everybody can offer. So to that step 2, we would put out an open call to all the talent on the Dingle Peninsula for ideas. What could you offer that would make these conferences or these long business days unique? We need to do some market research in step 3, just testing that concept with a potential business, a potential conference. One of the first ideas we had was, could we look at a conference for electric cars, for hydrogen transport, on the basis that you might be able to get quite a large amount of people sort of coming to Dingle from different businesses. There's a concept that happens very similar in Sweden. In the Arctic Circle in Sweden, I think there's a month or 2 in the winter where half the European car industry descends to the middle of nowhere, because they developed this idea that this would be the place to test cars in the winter. So that's the kind of thing we're thinking about. In the long run, it becomes repeatable, and sort of whole industries should perhaps turn up for weeks at a time to interact with each other, but also with us on the peninsula. Yeah, step 4, coordinate and the running and hosting of the event, which sounds nice and simple. And of course, then we have to just launch it and review it. So yeah, that's it. Mila, everybody, and thank you.
Thanks very much, David. That's great. We're not doing too bad on time now. What we want to do is, they're all of the ideas that have emerged from this workshop to date. As I have mentioned, it's not all of the ideas to help build a vision, but it is a fantastic starting point. I'm going to get Vitor to share with us now a way that those of you watching here tonight can maybe make a comment on an idea, contribute. So we need to share this link with everyone here. So we're going to send a link to all panelists and attendees, and hopefully you can see that link. And
it should be super straightforward.
I'm going to share my screen again,
yeah,
so that you can
better.
see it. And if everyone wants to click on that link, all of the ideas are there. Vitor, I'll let you.
Let's try to do in sync. So basically we placed all the ideas around the board, and this is kind of like a digital whiteboard. So zoom in, zoom out to get to be able to read the ideas. You see, zoom in, zoom out. And then the way you can give a feedback is by taking a stick note. We left a few there. You can also just add, or you can copy and paste one stick note and write your own. You see some activities already happening. I think the point here is it's not only to give feedback to each idea, but it's almost like how to start a conversation around those ideas. And that can also go a little bit more deep, and maybe you wanna share contact or another person that you think should be involved. So I think it's beyond just giving feedback. It's beyond just saying if you like or not. This is not the board of likes and dislikes. It's the board of like sometimes is an idea that made you think about something else. Share that with us. I think each idea is a little bit of like a seed. So help us understand what can grow out of that. This is going to stay open even after we finish this session. That means you guys can keep going and talking and maybe enter another day. Just be mindful that it's an open link. It means anyone with that link can enter and do things. So just be mindful when sharing that link, and also when you move things around. But other than that, I just hope you can engage and start a conversation around some of these ideas. They're really, at least from my experience so far, they're really inspiring, and there's like really a very committed group behind each of those ideas. But I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Fisher. So as Fisher has said, that link is going to stay open. We may password protect it in the near future, just so we don't lose any of your feedback. But please feel free to continue after this session has ended. If you have an idea tomorrow morning, you can just pop it in on a sticky note there. Let us know if there are ideas that you can contribute to and get involved with. So we're close enough to time now, and with that, I suppose I just want to bhvala mo buchas agwal le gach cainteoir an seo an ocht le gachéine a bhí páirteach sa Cairdean agus libse an luchtdéisteachta. Tá méid tuairt an sesiún seo chun Derek ach tá súlagam nach bhfuil an seo ach tá snú do gníomhaíochtaí últach don lehinis. I'd like to thank all of our speakers here this evening, all of their group members who took part in the workshop, and all of you for listening as well. I'm bringing this session to a close, but I'm hoping that it's just the start of working together to build this vision. So with strong collaborations already established in the areas of agriculture, energy, transport and tourism, I think there are many opportunities to find resources to make these ideas a reality. But they can really only happen with the strength of the community behind them, and once we know what the community wants. As I mentioned already, we've recorded this session and we'll send the link to all the registered participants, and we'll place it on the Curcaghine Fehatrucha website. So please share it with anyone else you know who may be interested, and please bring these ideas to anyone's attention that you feel would like to get involved. So continue to contribute to our Miro board afterwards, or you can register your interest on the workshop webpage that we sent that link with the invite, and that can be found on Curcaghine Fehatrucha as well, or you can simply send us an email at info@dinglehub.com to get involved. So thanks again everyone for your time. Good night.